How are you?
Good. How are
Sorry, I was a
you?
little early. And I was trying to get this note taker off because it's weird, but anyway, it's gonna be on there. I know it looks like a random thing is here, but this is how I make the podcast easy.
I love that for you. How
Good
does that
morning.
work? I don't even understand. Like, what does the note taker do? I mean, it literally takes notes, or?
It does take notes, but what it does is give me the a good video and audio feed. I don't use the video. I know people do that in podcasts these days, but I'm not doing that. I mean, I capture an image of us for the socials, but it gives me a really good audio so I can then bring it into Audacity and what little editing I do. It helps me do that.
Cool.
I'm
That's
so
really
glad you could do this kind of last minute. I wasn't going to start recording until the new year, and then I think actually I have a window now better than I'll have it. So,
well. I appreciate being asked because I've been listening to you and I've been enjoying
yeah,
it. So,
I had a list and you were on there. Um so we can get started if you want.
oh, are you on the residency?
No, I went or we can do this and then I can say, okay, we're going to start this. That would be great. Selfishly, I would love that just because I've questions for you about your show and your residency. So I had access to the facilities and a studio there and all of their techs and faculty and stuff for 2 months in theory or in reality. But when I interviewed with them or when they gave me an invitation, I was like, look, that's never going to happen. Like, I can't. I left for 2 weeks to Yaddo, and that was like the tensile strength of my family. Like, right now, I can't do that. And then fall semester is just harder for me to leave than spring semester. So they were like, it's fine. Do whatever. Here's the stipend. We don't pay for housing, and that's actually going to be tricky. So do what you got to do, whatever. So I just went for not even a week, 2 weeks ago.
Cool.
It was great. I mean, what I had to view it as, it wasn't like, oh, I'm making work for a show. I don't know how to do ceramics. I don't know how to think about kilns and glazes. Like, I'm just so new. So I kind of just made some things that were approximating what I was already making with like air dry clay and then just asked a ton of questions. Like, how would this work? How would I do this? And that was fun, and also asked questions and then made friends. And then sent them a box of chocolate later saying like, use my studio however you need to now. And it turns out, so they did say, they were like, don't worry about timelines. If you want to come back in the spring, like, I am one of the only people in that building who's faculty level. I mean, I'm not, but who is from Arkansas, and everyone else is, been recruited from all over the country or all over the world because they have a ton of money there because of Crystal Bridges.
Cool.
Or not Crystal Bridges, but Alice Walton's money. So I do think I'm a big asset. I think not so much the grad students because it's fully funded, so they're not really Arkansans, but the undergrads are like hungry for someone like me to be like, hey, I know what it's like for people to make fun of you in the art world for saying "ol," or
That sucks.
oh God, I mean that's the least of what I've endured, but yeah. So they were great. Maybe I'll go back in January. I'm not sure. I left a ton of stuff there, but they're able to give my studio to Raven Half Moon, whose work I love. She makes like these.
Yeah.
She's an undergrad, but an art star now. Yeah. So how about yours?
Residency wise, like,
Yeah.
I was in Newfoundland. Are we recording?
We don't have to. I mean, we are. I am recording, but I
don't know when to start because
I'll tell you when.
I would say it was a great experience, but I spent a lot of time being very allergic to my space. Because there was a dog in there beforehand and the guy didn't clean up. So, and like, I don't want to ding the residency for
Yes,
that,
yes,
but
yes.
like,
We are not, this will not ever make it on there. Yeah.
so like, you know, the whole like visual versus like the actual, which is kind of interesting. And I will talk about that on the record because I think that's important.
Yes.
But
It
yeah,
really is. Yeah, yeah.
because I mean, I had a great experience being there, but as far as like the like logistics of it, like I'm still exhausted.
It was a long residency too, huh?
Well, and I came a week late because I was opening my show.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that was a fast turnaround.
I guess we should start because I could just get into all this stuff and then.
Yeah, so I don't ask, you've heard it, and just to keep editing easy, I don't ask the questions on the front end. I just publish them everywhere and everyone knows the 2 questions. And then you as the guest can just launch. Have you
Okay,
ever
cool.
thought of quitting, and what does that look like for you? If you haven't, if you have, what would you be doing if you weren't making art?
I like that a lot of folks on your podcast answer like, yes, I have thought of quitting the art world, but not
Right.
necessarily like making, because I think making is sort of a bodily thing for me. Like it's sort of something I do, whether or not I'm, you know, aware of it. Even sometimes like it's almost a default. Like when I'm stressed out, I make. When I'm lonely, I make. When I'm sad, I make. You know, like it's both a coping mechanism and a joyful thing. Like it's all of that. So I don't think I'll stop making, but as far as like thinking about quitting the whole like grind of trying to show and applying for stuff, always. I think when I was an undergraduate, I was not in art school, and I didn't think I was going to major in art. I thought I was going to be a writer. So
Ooh.
even though I'd been drawing since I was like tiny and like made friends with drawings and like they were kind of currency for me, around like junior high, I started writing a lot. And so that's part of how I got admitted to school. I don't think my art muscles were totally developed when I went off to college in the like professionalized sense. And it just was funny because I couldn't keep myself away from the painting studio when I was an undergrad. And no part of like my family was like, yeah, do this. You know, they were like,
Yeah.
don't you think maybe advertising or like, don't you want to become a lawyer or a doctor or something? You know, like you have all these skills and this skill set. Like, don't you want to do that with your, you know, education from your nice liberal arts school? Like, you know, and I just couldn't stay away and ended up at the school down the hill from my school for grad school because that's sort of like when you can't stay away from the studio, it's sort of you roll down, I guess. So that part was all, you know, easy for me. The making part was always easy, but the like mismatch socially, I think, was really pretty clear from the beginning.
The mismatch socially, meaning like you felt outside of that ecosystem because you had started in writing, or you felt behind, or where does that mismatch come?
It's kind of funny. Like I was always looking for artist friends because I had a lot of like scientist friends, and you
Mhm.
know, I think I always thought I was like too nerdy for the art world or like not pretty enough for, you know, like all these different things. Cause I think there's something that's like so glamour adjacent about the art world. And
Yes.
for me, I never felt like I was enough, you know, as a person for that. Like I was always enough in the art studio, but like as a person, I definitely, and it didn't help that, you know, both my husband and I deal with mental illness. So like throw that in there too, you know, and shake it around.
Hmm.
Um, it's gotten easier as I've gotten older and known more people and sort of felt like, you know, I go and I see friends when I go to things and that's easier. But it took me a long time to make artist friends. And I always felt sort of strange when I was doing that. Like I wasn't the cool like smoker outside.
I see. Yeah, I see. Oh, girl, me neither. I was the Bohemian Christian who was like judging the smokers. What a dumb art student. Like I was super, yes, I can just relate to that. So do you find that your writing, was that early writing interest peaked because like you were good at it and you thought, well, I'll follow it. What else am I going to do? Or do you find that it really was a current that has come back into your practice?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it was something that I could do when I was younger, and so I was sort of like shoved into that. Like, art making won't make you any money, and even though you do this like natively, like it's like the thing that you're comfortable with. Like, we're gonna say like you can art make in this way, which might
Mm,
make you money. Like it might help you in some way, and it did help me get into school. And I think writing well never hurts for kind of marketing your work and all of that.
mm,
um, I sort of wonder because I've strayed away from it. Like I have these moments where I can't write or read, and I don't think it's just mental illness or like depression or anything. I think it's actually that like I'm either thinking in pictures or I'm thinking in sentences, and it's one or the other. Like I can't do both. So most of the time, my journals were sentences for many, many years, and then all of a sudden they became straight pictures, and now they're just pictures punctuated with like short sentences and text. But I tried like layering text on my work because that felt authentic for a while. But
mhm.
yeah, no, it's definitely like an interesting kind of pass the ping pong ball back and forth. I like writing about other people's work.
Yeah, I do too. I find it hard, but I find yeah, it's like the least I can do for art that I love or something is to then commend it in writing. Because I know how meaningful it is to have a piece of writing about your work as an artist. Like if you're not the only one like ringing the dinner bell about it, it's just so helpful to have that consensus. Um, Interesting. So we've talked before just about the heft of or the heft of being an artist for sure, being a visual artist, and all that kind of comes with that in this ecosystem sometimes. So that you mentioned the writing, kind of the advocacy part, self-advocacy, but also a teaching part and whether to do that as if it is a choice, and the financial part. Do you have specific stories where any of those spokes of the wheel have informed your like wanting or not to throw in the towel or actually throwing in the towel for a little bit, even if you didn't tell people you were?
I like that as a kind of prod. Um, I think teaching is like all purpose and no money. It's like all like love and labor, and at least especially when you're adjunct as I've always been. Like I did one search where I tried to get full time, and I ended up in like final rounds places, and it was kind of heartbreaking because I didn't get up the jobs. And it that was very punishing too. I think you see some of the like worst parts of the art world when you're job searching in it because they're like,
Yes.
oh, you don't look the part. And I'm like, oh, why? Because I'm so many pounds overweight, or like there were definitely
Yeah.
like moments where people
Isn't it the worst? I
they
have had
made a lot
to
of
do,
assumptions. I've
yes.
had assumptions made about me being from the Northeast and where I went to school, and that I couldn't teach in Michigan because I couldn't relate to their students. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that. Right.
Right. Oh God, we could do a whole podcast just on those assumptions.
It
Then you
was
have to
very
see
demeaning.
those people at openings and conferences. I mean, if you're lucky, you don't, but yeah, yes, it is punishing. That is a great way to describe it, Kirsten.
Well, and also I think I started searching before I really knew how hard it was. And I'd been teaching for like over 10 years when I did my search. So it was kind of interesting because it was like people assumed that you had no experience if you had gaps in your resume and were only an adjunct. And it was like, well, I don't know, I've taught this many classes and I've worked with this many students and I've, mentored people who are doing, their thesis, and, it felt like a lot of the different, things that I had done didn't count because they weren't on paper as some sort of like tenure track development. And,
Yes.
I felt like I spent a lot of time trying to split my time between my practice and teaching. And right now I'm not teaching. I went on a residency in September and turned down a painting job. Maybe I regret that a little bit because I know the department doesn't have a lot of jobs for adjuncts anymore because they're no longer going to have a studio art major where I worked,
Oof.
which is hard. And I'm not sure if they're going to have a place for me, but I liked working there, and it's sad. But that's the thing with being contingent too, is that your place isn't guaranteed, and you're just sort of there at their pleasure and at the student's pleasure. And I had kind of a rough semester of teaching evaluations, and that really kind of hurts your soul too a little bit, because I was focusing more on my creative practice and not so much on the students, because by necessity I was planning for shows. And I think you kind of rob Peter to pay Paul sometimes.
Yes. And yes.
And that felt bad too, because you're like, oh, I'm not really measuring up in any of these, circles, because I'm just sort of,
Yeah.
and I'm not a parent. I'm just a, woman with a husband and some cats, but that's almost like too much for me, just with juggling the career and trying to be a teacher part-time. And it seems silly to say that, but I think everybody, takes on what they can handle.
Yeah. I don't think it's silly to say that. And I do have so many children. I'm like the old woman who lives in the shoe.
Oh, don't you have 3?
I have 3. That
My
feels,
best friend has 3. I mean, that's normal. That's not so many.
sometimes I feel like the Duggars. Do you know that reference? It's like,
Yes,
okay. Um,
you're so funny. No, 3 is totally
oh, I mean,
normal.
the amount of like, I mean, just yeah, what the things people in the art world said to me, have said over the years. When I got married really young, some of the things 30 years later, I get. I'm like, yeah, I would say the same thing to someone that age. But having children, especially having the third, my favorite was a dear colleague and friend, a peer. They have no children. They've been in academia their entire career, including before they got their master's. So, I mean, there's like some degrees of privilege, and in many ways have earned that spot. That's no shade thrown. However, so it's coming from a very generous place. But when I said I'm pregnant again with my third, she said, "Good Lord." That's
I
like
mean,
the mildest. That is the mildest and the most generous lens on that. But just connecting it back to kind of your experience too, of like whatever difference a committee sees, whatever, I mean, most full-time academics have a very limited worldview because they've had to fight so hard and be embedded in it, and or they've chosen to be embedded in it.
I
And
have a
those,
lot of respect for that. I'm not saying I
yes,
don't. Like, I wanted to be among them. I just didn't have the, I guess,
yeah,
the right interview face, maybe.
yes. I think I'm probably similar to you. I think I'm an amazing teacher, and I bet you would be too. But in terms of like, I left an academic position, speaking of quitting, and I didn't realize I was quitting. I was like having my first kid and thinking like, I don't know how, I have no idea how to be a mother. My partner travels. Like at that point, it was kind of full time. So it's like, we're
Oh, wow.
gonna get a nanny, which just like scarcity mindset from having grown up not around artists and not in an ecosystem that has a ton of money. I was just like, I can't do this. I can't hire a nanny. We don't come from those people. Um, yeah, so I quit, and I thought I would just maybe have 1 or 2 kids, and I would adjunct before. So I never realized I was quitting, or adjunct before I got back into it. And then time kind of marched on. I never quit making art, but it just set me up in terms of interviews to be, I think, to be someone who's just outside of a system, for them to do the creative labor to imagine a professor that looks differently than the path. And I think that's an art ecosystem too. Like
Yeah.
we want this path to look like collectors. They just want a shorthand to make sure they're making good on their investment.
Well, it's like a building, kind of thing. Like first there's this layer, then there's this layer, then there's this layer. And I just remember being in this one interview for this really nice school that was like an R1 school. And this artist I really respected sat down and was like, so tell me about the gaps in your resume. And I was like, oh, what? Like no one had ever just like been like that to me. And I was like, well, I mean, I worked at Macy's. I like, did
Yeah.
visual design. Like I was a
I still
an
hear that.
admin, and like I think that was also like I was showing, but like not places that are still on my resume because it's gone further. Like it was one of
Yeah,
those
you were
weird
working.
things. And I feel like, you can say you're working, and then like if your resume doesn't show a particular thing, or even like, we've had moments in our household where both of us have had to take time off to take care of mental health. And I don't mean to like use that as a shorthand, but there are times where, you're just not functioning, and that's also, I mean, I
Mm.
think people don't want to necessarily invest in a person that they're not sure about their, long-term ability to kind of function. So that was hard, to be like, oh, okay, I'm a bad risk.
Yeah, I've never really thought about how perhaps these outlier things in our practice in our lives and our teaching careers make us risky, make people risky. I have heard the gaps. It's not just like older tenured academics who are on committees. I have heard that same language. Um, it's interesting. I mean, by like someone in their 20s more recently on a board, and I was just like, oh my God, I thought we were beyond. I think the context was I was sharing a possibility of an application that this opportunity was coming up, and this entity nonprofit wanted to make sure they were doing the application materials correctly, and I suggested that a annotated CV or a career narrative like you have to write for the Guggenheim might be a generous way to offer artists to show what their career has been as opposed to read a CV, which I am never a fan of. It just kind of it punches it punches up for the people who could afford fancy schools when they were young, or could at least even knew they existed. Anyway, I just think it's not always a great measure if it's the only thing. And yeah, they said, oh, a career narrative. I mean, this is a very young artist, and they're looking at me with 3 kids. I mean, this person has never known me in my not being a full-time artist. They've never known me as a professor, as a full-time curator, all these things I've done.
Yeah.
So they said, oh, so you mean to explain some of the career gaps? And I said, no, actually, to expand. And this is someone of, anyway, no,
Oy.
to expand for a committee who we, or to expose to a committee who were axing out because we have these. Anyway, not everyone appreciates that.
Well, I think also in the age of AI, it's gotten even more kind of prominent that we need to be, more careful about how we're reading documents like that, because I think it's very easy to be like, this gets sorted into the no pile really quickly. And it's like, well, why? Like, are we actually looking at the work, or are you looking at like the dates on things? Like, that
Yeah.
to me seems really wrong in some way. And I mean, yes, if there's like some major red flags, like this person has made work in 5 years and they're applying for a grant, maybe then worry. But like,
Well, what if work is better if they haven't made work in 5 years? That's also the arc of an artist. Made work. I'm air quoting, but what if your practice includes an embeddedness in something else? What
yeah.
if, like, what if we what if we don't all have childcare? What if we don't all have what if we don't all have mental health all the time? And of course we know that's true that we don't all, but yeah, the optics of this world, of this art world we're in, you said earlier the tie to, or the glamour adjacent nature of the art world. I've been thinking about this a lot, I think, because it, as artists, whether we're at home in these like fancy collector worlds, I also don't want to malign like a collector community, but it also puts artists in conversation with money a lot. And so many of us are just not comfortable. And then it makes everybody else uncomfortable. And I don't know if that's what you mean, but I wonder, is that what you mean when you say glamour adjacent, or is it something more
Well,
social media based, or?
I can say that I've been to a couple of parties a long time ago when I was a young artist, and I felt like the dowdiest person in the room, let's just say. And I also wasn't based in New York, so I didn't have like a working knowledge of like the community. And I was very lucky to be in this wonderful show and get to go to this opening. And I mean, I was meeting like former like supermodels in my like, J. Crew, discount dress, and feeling really like awkward, and just also not like fitting very well into clothing, and like, like all of those kind of things. And then like seeing these absolutely gorgeous people, and like, drinking cocktails with somebody who had bought and sold the Empire State Building. Like it's very surreal. And so like it's entertaining and interesting, but like the day-to-day experience of being an artist is just being like grimy and having stuff under your nails. Like,
Yeah.
so for me, it just,
Okay.
it didn't always compute. It was fun, and I loved every minute of it, in that I felt like I was like an alien who was like visiting, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. And you were in Providence, correct? So
I've been off and on in Providence since I was an undergrad. So I did have the very fancy schools as a backdrop, but then I spent like 10 years in the wilderness, if you will, after them, rather than getting a bump. And I know that's what you're
yeah,
supposed to do with a fancy school, but I didn't know how to do that.
yes. So many of us don't. But I mainly mentioned that for listeners who are, because I knew where you were, who um aren't aware of that still, that kind of like, oh, you're not in New York.
Mhm.
And you were just in Providence. I mean, I spent almost a decade in Boston, so I understand like how small the states are up there, and also how wonderfully dense the art world is in New York City. I have a relationship with it too. So again, not to malign that, but that is as bad as like saying you have gaps on your resume. It's to like be like, I mean, what? Providence is like a 2-hour train ride to New York City? Like it's
Three,
okay,
but
3.
three and a half. And that's if you take the fast
But I
train and you're willing
understand.
to spring.
Yes.
But
And even for those of you who are in those storied, like Risty Brown, whatever, spaces, like even you in that situation had just not always a slam dunk with it.
well, I mean, you have to think there's like 10 painters a year in the RISD program, and you probably hear about one of them, you know,
Uh-huh.
as much as, you think of it as like a cohort, it's tricky. And I think it's worth talking about all of these like wonderful artists that maybe don't get that like massive bump coming out of school. Because I think those folks are fascinating and wonderful, but then there's a lot of other really wonderful people that maybe like slowly build in like regional shows, and they're building their practice. And I don't think there's a lot of sort of conversation around that. Like, I think what's nice about the online community that has started to build is that people are more sort of authentically interested in like artist to artist. What have you
Yes.
been doing, and what's going on with your life, and where are you, and like what is your narrative, and like no judgment on that, just curious. And
Yes.
like that curiosity to me is fantastic, because I never really wanted to be in New York because it kind of overwhelmed me. I grew up in New Jersey, so I could have. gone there. But my husband and I couldn't have made it there.
Yeah, I think that's for I mean, I had a curator even say when I moved here to Nashville, I'm in Tennessee, and I have been for 20 years. I moved after graduate school, and he said something like, "Oh, well, being in New York denotes like some kind of ambition." And I was a really early adopter of this bleeding edge of saying like, yeah, it also isn't for everybody. And I'm super ambitious, but I cannot pay that rent.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had friends say, well, everybody feels that way in New York. And I respect that too. I know a lot
Yeah.
of those friends also had their school paid for by, a relative or whatever. So I don't mean, this podcast really is not about like kind of, it's just more about letting some of those other stories kind of bubble up, I guess. Like this is how varied it can look. Like we get the highlight you get is you get a bump out of grad school. Like what if you don't go to grad school? What if you make the wrong quote unquote choice of grad school because you did not know that there was this hierarchy because you were 23 or whatever. What if you can't? Yeah, what if it's just not? What if we're privileging a very narrow slice of what it looks like to be an artist, particularly in the United States? And
I
what,
think you're absolutely right.
yeah, yeah,
And it's been really heartening to see this like kind of flowering of at least an artist community that's sort of broadening their spectrum. I don't know about a collector community or an academic community necessarily, although I have run into more non-traditional academics recently who are really wonderful and like came to academia late, and like that's a really like breath of fresh air. And I see more narratives in the art world like that too, but it's still a very small slice, and it's very helpful to have podcasts like what you're doing that sort of talk about like the kind of, oh, I love this, I keep wanting to do it, but it keeps pushing back. Like every rejection you get, every kind of push back down. And I'm in a good place. I have a gallery. I love them. They push my work. Like
yeah,
I am happy in the town that I'm in. I think it's endlessly fascinating, even though it's small, and it's rich, and I have a great community here. And I'm very grateful for all of that. But like, yeah, when, push comes to shove and you're like, well, I guess I could have, pushed harder by living in a closet in New York. Like maybe, it's a strange bargain that people ask for.
yeah, yeah, I do know. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Um, how did your show go? And we can be off or we can, whatever. I can.
Well, it went well. It was a beautiful show. Um, I would say that I'd like it to sell a little bit better, but that's true with like everything right now, I think. I get a lot of pushback like, can you make that smaller right now? And I think
Yes.
part of that is also that people are allocating their money to really needed things like,
Yeah.
the food bank or a political cause that really needs their attention, or people getting deported. It's an emergency like across the board. So I
Yeah.
understand why like discretionary spending on art is down, or at least
Yeah.
in the like mid-tier, not in like the hot house of New York City where people have like money to burn, like the places that are outliers, like maybe people aren't buying with the same regularity.
Yeah. 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 Um, it is such an odd dissonance to have right now to be. The studio is always just like an immersion for me, but to have that dissonance between what's going on outside. And it ebbs and flows, but it feels particularly fraught now more than it ever has. I live in a supermajority Republican state, and a dickwad of a governor who also is also like the elder of his church, and like definitely feels like a theocracy as close as we can get to it.
Yeah, we are living in The Handmaid's Tale, but it's just not quite as oppressive yet as it could be, and they're getting there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really scary. I feel like that's why I'm not like crushed by it. Like if this had happened to me a couple of years ago and I had like, because my last solo show did very well, and I think that this moment, like, it's very rare for shows to be doing very well. I don't know if this is on the record or not. I'm not sure if I should put it on the record just because I don't want to impair the gallery. They've
Yeah, yeah,
stood
yeah.
behind me
Yes.
so heartily, though. They were like, we really believe in this work. We think this is the best work you've made to date. We think that the market is weird right now and we want to support you. And this isn't a ding on you. And that was like,
Yeah.
holy shit, that's a really generous and kind thing to say. I was really worried when we had our meeting that they were going to say, well, bye. Like, I'm so ready for like the next thing to be like, goodbye.
Meaning you're always expecting that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think like I've talked to artists who are having like giant, like good friends who are having these giant moments right now, like museum surveys and shows in Europe, and even they're like, I've been burned before. I'm just taking this all very conservatively. Um, yeah, I mean, this isn't, my gallery here in Tennessee has been amazing. I've only been with them for a year, but consistent sales. I don't know how. I think a lot of it is like they have been in business for a long time and they have the same collectors who are just like, all right, tee up who we need to buy this month or whatever.
That's nice.
I mean, I'd like to think also I'm not a hard sell. Like I got that New York Times mention and like didn't have a gallery. So it just felt like this, like a major thing was just like speaking into a void. I was just like, so I also very much appreciate their amplification of like the hard work I'm doing. But I'm kind of
such a thing, isn't it? Like just to have someone else who's like, hey, this happened to our artist,
yes. Yeah. Hey, we believe in you. This happened and we sold these pieces or yeah, I am really grateful. Yeah, I'm not where I need to be in terms of like but again, but I'm okay. My husband has a job. Again, where, just 2 years ago I was getting food stamps, like 4 years ago. Or government assistance, I should say, because my job was terminated during COVID.
Oh God.
Yeah, so it's been a lot worse, but it's really fine and my kids are healthy and my practice is healthy. Like I'm really excited about what's happening.
Yeah, I guess we never got to the part where we talk about what we would do if we weren't doing it.
Oh, let's do that. Yeah.
Okay, so we're like on and off, and
We're
maybe you'll
on
just
with it.
edit out the like
I
part
know how
where
to
I
do
say
it.
that. So
Yeah.
jobs that well, because it's more, all right, just real talk. It's more that like I think that they're slow to sell things now, and that's just how it is. Like they still place everything, but it takes months, and that's the way the gallery works now. And I have patience with that.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much they want that talked about. They're just really wonderful, and they know what they're doing.
Cool.
But as far as jobs that I would do, other than being a painter, and again, not ever going to stop painting and drawing, but definitely pulling out of the whole idea of the art world has been a thing that it seems like it's appealing at times. Right now, I don't think so, but I have thought about being a librarian. Because I had a librarian friend and I thought, wow, that would be really cool. But then I realized how much school I'd have to go back for. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And then I thought about being a therapist, again, the school problem, because I like listening to people and solving their problems. That's probably a little unhealthy and a little codependent of me, but like hearing what you're researching or hearing what you're struggling with and then trying to kind of fetch some answers for people. Teaching definitely scratched that itch in a way. So those are things that I've thought about and thought kind of, I like being supportive, but not in a way where like when I was working support staff, that was always really hard because people would treat you like gum on their shoe, and I don't want to do that again.
I've done that too. I've been executive assistants like in big insurance companies and .coms, and the amount of, yeah, you really do take a lot on the chin as a woman if you're in those like roles. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Well, the librarian and the therapist kind of teaching scratches both of those itches because you're.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, isn't it?
Mhm.
And I'm just like, oh, well, they're people facing, but without being support staff. Like you have expertise. And I think that's still where I'd want to land, you know. But I also feel like what's nice about being an artist is that you can kind of engage in all of those things without having to have those advanced degrees. I mean, there is this kind of like lovely, like dilettante sphere that we are in where we can like jump into different things for a little while and then jump out again, and you know.
Yeah. Yeah. At the residency that I just was on, I visited the special collections at the university library. There are a couple of specific, well, I'll say it was the C.D. Wright archives, and she was the poet laureate of Rhode Island for years, and
Yeah.
then at Brown. So they have a number of her, they don't have everything, they have a number of her things in their archive. And shout out to special collections at the University of Arkansas, Cassidy. They were amazing. They showed me extra things
Mm.
that I asked for, like specifically in a really dark moment of history that we are in, but also harkening back.
Mm.
Hitler's underlings in 1934 finished a paper for graduate school at the University of Arkansas, a paper on labor and economics. And I had read something about this in the New Yorker. I mean, I'm just mirroring back. Yes, I would love to be a librarian or researcher, but but I had known that this was true. I wasn't making it up. And I said, guys, I know I'm here to see CD write stuff, but do you? And I was like whispering it because it's so dark. It's like, oh my God, the Holocaust, the moment in history of the Holocaust, and that's some higher ups in the Nazi Party in the 30s were schooling themselves in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I don't know, like, anyway, it's certainly true. They showed me his little term paper without gloves. I was like thumbing through this piece of history, like a reminder that history and evil is so banal. Like it amounts to a guy applying to school from Germany, hopping the pond, studying for 3 years, embedded in this very rural state where they can learn about Indian Removal Act and Jim Crow laws. Like all of this because I applied to a clay residency at the University of Arkansas. It was like, so I feel you on just the penchant for research, and like as much as the studio gave to me that week, the library gave equally as much, and conversations. Like I think artists, yeah, we can dip in and out into different topics and subjects and cohorts and colleagues and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel very lucky that we have that. And I feel very lucky that I live in a city where I'm around some really top flight libraries that I can go into. And that's really wonderful too. And, one of the perks of being an academic was always the access to the academic libraries. And I feel
Yes.
like that's where I sometimes felt most at home, even if I wasn't like doing research per se, just like being at a Carol reading, like that was, that was
Yeah.
important to me too. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that like glamour labor mismatch thing that we've been talking about too. I don't know, some people seem to be in the art world for like a kind of social bump. And I feel like I only recently started to feel like socializing in the art world was fun and comfortable because it's like my local friends in Rhode Island, but I
Yeah.
understand it now a little bit more. And I find that really interesting because I I see sort of how art functions as this like excuse to get together and be in a collective, and it just wasn't ever something I felt like I could join until recently, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I love your observations on like how social media has exposed like a supportive or even nurtured or supportive artist communities that don't depend on, I don't know, pedigree or, it can be connected to that. I always had a social life up until 10 years ago of the church, like very embedded. I was like going
Mm.
to church at least once a week, Bible studies. This is all through grad school, all through my like I
Wow,
was 40.
that's unusual.
I was in it. And there's so much to commend. I generally was in like more socially progressive spaces and until it was apparent that I wasn't, and that informed leaving for me. But I always had folks to see every Sunday.
Mm.
And then once a week, if people were coming over for dinner and Bible study or something, it is odd. It feels very odd. 10 years out, it feels like really like a way different part of my life. It was, but I didn't need the art world to be my social net or my community. Not that it's not lovely, but I'm seeing that now because I'm not in the church, and my kids have made me somewhat invisible, or I have chosen to be invisible in some of the art world circles because I've chosen to have children and I want them to be healthy. I want our family to be healthy. And so that means an amount of not being present in ways that I was able to be.
Sure.
But all that to say, like I have to really charge myself up for being social in the art world because I do like it. I do like seeing people that are connected with the same histories that I am, and in the same way that I liked going to church and like seeing people that were like rallied around this similar campfire as me. Um, but I'm also more tired these days.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say my mid 40s are kind of like doing a number on my joints. And, you know, there's definitely, I'm starting to feel my age, you know. Oof.
Yeah. But we contain multitudes. We have so much up here that's like the best we've ever been. Yeah,
Yeah, I think that 40s are definitely a good decade. Like it's way easier than 20s.
for me, 100%. Yeah, yeah.
There's less judgment, even if, you know, as you say, you can be more invisible as a woman. I think that there's so much power and like beauty in that too, that like you're seen just as a person doing things, not a person being or not being successfully visually an accent, you know. um,
Mm, mm,
because I feel like so much of like being in your teens and 20s is like showing up as a woman in a way that's socially appropriate for whatever milieu you're in, you know?
mm. Yeah, you've thought about that. Yeah, yeah.
Just
Well,
because
I
I
mean,
haven't fit in a square peg round hole, you know?
yeah, yeah. Um, I'm excited to see what you. I mean, I've saw some images of what you made at Pooch Cove, but I haven't really done a deep dive of that. So, do you feel like there was any like great? I know this is off the record, but
Mm,
do you feel like there was any great breakthrough, or if it was just like put your head down, it was a great time to make stuff, or
great time to make stuff. Um, this is cool to be on the record if you want. I feel like my palette changed radically, and that's something that when I
Hmm.
travel, I feel like that happens. And this was my first international residency. And, you know, one of the best things about being an artist is that you can travel on a shoestring. So we all funded our residency by donating work. Um, yeah, so that was our payment, if you will. There was no dollars exchanging hands.
Wow.
And that's really wonderful. It was nearly canceled because of the tariffs, because the person who ran it was worried he wasn't going to be able to sell the work back to the US in a way that would make a profit. And we were all Americans. So there was definitely like I'm frustrated with the Americans, like not
Yes.
doing appropriate things, but we were very grateful that he changed his mind and that maybe, he's able to make enough off of sales from artwork from Americans that he can keep running his residency. But it was really surprising how much like a different space and an international space changed the work. And maybe it was also just looking at our country from outside. Like going to the wine store to get wine for the potluck and then being in an aisle where it was like the greatest hits of the store. And they were like, well, this used to be the American wine section. And it was like, there were all these moments where we would say, oh, I'm from so-and-so place. And I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, I'm so sorry you're American.
Yeah.
I've never had that response before. And it was very authentic and it was very kind. And there was a lot of love that they shown to us, even though our country maybe isn't showing as much love. But that was really warm and enveloping. And then where we were in Pooch Cove is right where the sun rises first on the continent. So we would go in the morning, and I don't get up early very much. I'm not really a morning person, but I forced myself to get up a few times, and it was just extraordinary because you have this like wide open landscape and the sun is just, I don't know how many sunrises I've seen in my life, honestly. I've seen a whole bunch because I went to Maine with my husband to travel, and he woke me up for the sunrise. And so I've seen more sunrises in the past couple of months than I've seen in my entire life. And that just changed my palette and how I want to like make paintings. And, the kind of gift of travel that people don't even like, it's hard to say how much that matters. And I wouldn't just go out of my way to do it if I wasn't funded in some way, because I know that like it feels like an extravagance unless you have money, to do it. And especially for art, you feel like I just got to be in the studio making what sells and like blah, blah, blah. And I think people got excited about the work that was coming out of the residency and out of my time there, that the palette was changing so radically, because I've been in the woods for like 3 years now. And it's been very much like dense and very little light has filtered through. So to have this like blast of light and these like bright oranges and pinks and yellows and stuff. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. And what a gift that you also have already processed that.
I don't know if I've processed it.
Meaning like I see this and perhaps, yeah.
I mean, I see the work coming out and I see how I'm responding to it, how my friends, my family, my peer network, my Instagram, how they're responding to it. And it's just like, oh, this is I'm really interested in cliche too. I always have been. So the fact that I'm like investigating one of the like pictorial cliches that I, maybe haven't spent enough time on. I used to assign cliches to students to kind of work through because I thought it was interesting.
Yeah. Like a heart, or like what kind of cliches?
Well, like sometimes it was just, make 5 images from print media, 5 images from contemporary art history, 5 images from 1945 to present, like, but really invest your heart and soul in kind of reinvigorating the cliche. So like if you're going to paint the sunrise, like why is this interesting? If you're going to paint clouds, because clouds is kind of a classic painting one exercise, right? And it's like how do you reinvest and make this something yours, specifically yours, and specifically could only be made by your hand right now. And that to me has always been very interesting, is that there is like a lot of mileage still left in cliche. A lot of the still life too. I feel like students find it very cliche, but then you're like, well, actually, it feels very different coming at it from this like, perspective of like the administration at a school being like, hey, everything needs to be kind of filtered in with AI and like, so you're like, actually, I want you to do this really antique handmade thing that has this like long history and find a way to make it yours.
Yeah.
And, maybe it is this kind of rich handmade thing that kind of pulls you back and makes you see something more clearly that, a past audience or even a past group of students wouldn't see it that way because they weren't so embedded in the digital culture,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I think we nailed it.
I hope so. I hope you
I
have a
think we
lot to
nailed
work
it.
with. And I know I'm like hesitant and like, is this off the record? Is this on the record? Because I don't know shit
Yeah.
about sales,
I will make sure some of that. I'm pretty good at this has happened several times. If it happens when it just happens because we're having a real conversation. But
Yeah.
I totally respect the uh yeah, I think some of those things will come out. And I'm happy to let you listen to it before it's published if you're just like, eh. But I have time markers on like what I think will be.
Well, and it's just because I trust them and think they're so great. And,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to share with people what they're doing, but I also don't want to like impinge upon it in some way,
There's no reason for us to feed the fire right now on how fucked up the art market is. Because frankly, it is, and I'm selling, and then, you know, 4 years ago it wasn't, and I wasn't selling. So I think also some not good gallerists are hiding behind that. It's a weird time, yeah, or
Mm.
possibly not working as hard as you could on behalf of, So I've kind of ridden the first Trump administration in my gallery was very sheepish, and I'm like, y'all don't do this full time. Like, I think you aren't equipped, but now you're blaming it on some economy, and it's okay. So yeah, I'll take all that out.
Thank you. And it's not to say that they are very well equipped. I just think that
They are.
there's a
Yeah, I heard that.
generational thing that's going
Yeah.
on in Boston right now with collectors, and they're
Mm,
trying to modernize their program. And I think that they're trying to find new audiences, and it's challenging. So, that's its own separate thing. And I'm just really grateful to be a part of a gallery that has such a long history.
yeah. Yeah, they sure do. I used to go there when I lived there. Um, yeah. Um, well, is it a studio day for you? It's always a studio day for us.
I mean, even when I'm not in the studio, I'm in the studio. Like I keep this space at home. This is my office and
Yeah.
it's just covered with paint because I just can't help it. Like when I have a day when I can't go to the studio, I'm here,
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's so good. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm
I hope you got everything you wanted and
amazing. You
I'm
killed it.
excited for the next batch of talks that come
I
out
am
too.
too. I'm getting Joanne Greenbaum too. So she's gonna be in
I
your
love her.
I do too. I love her work. I don't know if I love her, but she's
Oh
gonna be
no.
amazing. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure I just don't know her. So I'm trying to, yeah, it's gonna be fun to see what crop comes out of this.
Oh,
Uh,
I'm sure you're going to get all sorts of cool people from just the broader kind of interest in what you're talking about is huge right now
I
too.
think so. I think so. I think it's always been relevant. Um, yeah, and it has surprised me, like the who I think it's been surprising. It's good. Well, congrats on your residency, and we'll talk soon. Thank you. Have a great
Bye,
one.
Jody. Take care.
Bye.